Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this week's episode I am dealing with this Quarry Hunslet. This is a locomotive which we have got a customer on, so what we do is we pull it out and we test it. Now this was run over the Christmas period on the portable track that we have out, put down in the yard, and it was found to be a little bit lacking in power. Also it was found that there was a leak between the valve chest and the frames, so that all needed taken care of. Now the video footage I managed to get is actually taken over 2 days. This work that's been carried out has been done over 3 days, but I didn't have my camera the first day, where I ended up taking everything to bits. So where we pick up to it is the start of day 2. On day 1 I basically stripped the engine down, took the boiler off, got the valve chest off, got it resealed and back on the engine. So starting on today's work, I get about just doing a bit of a leak test. So I've got everything plumbed up on air, it's sat in neutral with the regulator open, effectively the valve here, and I'm checking to make sure everything's sealed, and then I run it and there's a horrible squealy noise, which tells me there's no oil getting to the cylinders. And on closer inspection, the waste shaft for the lubricator is in 2 pieces, and the little bracket that joins the 2 pieces together had stripped out the grub screws, so it was bloody useless. So I took these 2 pieces here, which had this little bracket joining thingy in the middle, got rid of that and replaced it with a single piece of 1/4 inch steel bar, which does the same job. Really don't know why it's in 2 pieces. It's no more difficult to put on and off. Yeah, really I don't understand. But new bit of rod on, lubricator drive is working again. So once the lubricator drive was fixed, it was then decided that there was definitely air getting passed on the pistons. So I set about taking the pistons out. Now to get the pistons out on this, you've actually got to take the running boards off, because you need to take the slide bars off and the crosshead off to be able to pull the piston out the back side, because it won't come out the front. Even though there's a big hole in the buffer beam, it won't slide out the front without the rear cylinder cover being off as well. So unfortunately it's everything off the running boards off, just to get to the slide bar, so I can then take the rear cylinder cover off, disconnect it from the crosshead and take it off the engine. Okay, so with cylinder covers out of the way, pistons are out, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rescue the piston rings, because they're going to get reused. The pistons are actually undersized in the bore. I think one side was about 40 thou undersized, the other side was about 65 thou undersized, which is not very conducive for creating a good seal within the piston. Here you can see quite a lot of slop with the piston inside the bore, and it seems that these have been undersized all its life, because there was only a small amount of wear on one piston, which is actually this piston here. It was worn on one side very slightly, and this side was the worst one. Yeah, as you can hear from the rattling, it is pretty janky. So before I go about making new pistons, I'm just honing the bores out ever so slightly, just cleaning up the faces. There wasn't any real heavy scoring or pitting in here, just a little bit of a quick clean, WD-40 in the hone, just to clean things up a little bit. Not going to go massive on honing these out. So once they're cleaned out, and pull a rag through, make sure they're all clean. I'm going to do both sides. As I say, I'm not going for a perfect finish on here. I'm just giving them a bit of a clean, and just, yeah, give them a clean. They weren't bad at all. There's a small amount of pitting on the bottom end, but you always see that. But yeah, just a little bit of a clean up. Then I come in with a bore gauge, and I'm measuring the bores just to check. So I'm measuring them up and down and side to side, just making sure that we have got nice round bores. Then I'm on to machining new piston heads. Now the original piston heads were cast, and they have recesses on both sides of the piston. These are just going to be flat pistons, purely because it's a lot simpler to make, and it doesn't really make much difference to compression rates. The thing that's going to matter the most here is the outer diameter. So I'm threading the inside of the piston here. So I've started with a raw chunk of cast iron and just cleaning up the threads on the piston rods, reusing the original piston rods. Therefore I can get the pistons placed exactly the same, and just sneaking up on the threading, because the piston itself is partially threaded and partially reamed, so they have a good tight fit. And as you can see here, using a big stilly to get them on, and then a good dollop of hard setting Loctite, and get these things nice and tight on. Then once they're on, I then turn the outer faces down to the diameter, which is, in this scenario, it's 2¼ inches. The original cylinder bore is 2¼ inches. The original pistons are really quite undersized, so that's the whole reason behind making new pistons. And I turn the two pistons down, do the outer face and the leading face of the piston. Right back now, I set up my little screen guard to stop me getting showered with the cast iron. This stuff really does make a mess. And then once they're all clean that side, I then trim the rear side down to make them the exact same width as the original pistons. Okay, so once the pistons are all done to dimension, it is then time to cut the piston ring grooves in. Now, the original piston ring grooves were seriously far too deep for the piston, and also they were baggy. So I am making sure I am doing the right width, so it's a good snug fit on the piston ring, and also a good depth where the piston ring does manage to go sub flush, but not too too baggy within the bore. Yeah, the original ones, they were super oversized ring gaps, whereas now they are pretty much perfect. And then it's a case of putting it all back together. And yeah, it took some finagling, a little bit of tapping, trying to get these things lined up. Now, this encounter was, it's unfortunately become the bane of my life. Now, I don't know why people use roll pins. I really don't. This piston rod and crosshead interaction here, it should ideally be a tapered pin. So I drill and ream the pinhole out, just making sure it's all nice and clean, get me piston all lined up properly, and ream it out to a good size for a decent size taper pin to go into it. I really don't know why people use roll pins in these high force areas, and they are an absolute pain to get in and out. So a little bit of going backwards and forwards, cleaning my reamer off on my leg there. I will get a cloth in a bit. Here we go, there's a cloth, so I can clean the reamer out using plenty of lubricant, get it nicely reamed, make sure my taper pin is seated through and out the backside, because if it's not poking out the back, you're never going to get the bloody thing out. And a good hammer in home, fitted nicely. Then it's all back together, so slide bars back on. Then it's going to be time for another test before I get it too far buttoned up. Now, when I was putting it all back together, I made sure I used a liberal amount of oil within the bores, because previously it was a little bit squeaky in there. So hopefully this time round it should run a lot smoother and be a lot quieter. I've taken care of quite a few things here, so it's new size pistons, which hopefully shouldn't blow by, and sealing up all the leaks of air from between the cylinder wall, and yeah, should be running Absolutely lovely now. Yeah, loads better. There's no wheeziness to it. It does need a little bit of a tweak on the valve timing. John gives me a hand off camera to sort that out. It is a little bit in need of just a little bit of an adapt, but it's not a million miles off now, so it really doesn't take a lot of regulator action to get the wheels spinning. Whereas before it was a case of you had to use your foot to get the bloody thing moving, because it was leaking steam so badly. Now here it's just a case of reassembling the entire engine, hopefully getting it back into a position where I can steam it. So running boards back on, just reversing all the dismantling I've done. Brake handle goes back on, reverser goes back on, and yeah, just hopefully one day this will all be back together again. Hopefully by the end of today. It took nearly a full day to sort out the pistons, a full day really on the first dismantling and diagnosing all the problems, a day on sorting the pistons out and getting it to this stage here, and then a day of putting it back together again. So before I put the boiler back on, I'm going to do a quick hydraulic test on it. Now this hydraulic test here, I am going up to twice working pressure. We have got paperwork for this boiler, but I'm going up to twice working pressure anyway. And the only real problem I find on this is I've got a leaky flange around the regulator on the back end. Everywhere else is nice and tight. This boiler is only about 10 years old, probably only seen maybe 3 or 4 years worth of actual service. But I need to reseal the gland around the regulator. It only had 4 bolts on, so I've doubled that number. It's now 8 bolts, so I've got a good flange seal. It also only had some goo behind it. There was no actual material gasket there, so fingers crossed this should all work out first try, and I won't have to revisit this part. But come Monday, yeah, so tomorrow, I shall be just doing another quick hydraulic test on the locomotive while it's all in one piece, and make sure this is all sound prior to doing a steam test. Yeah, it really is a bit of a funky regulator setup here. You've got to kind of put it together in a certain order, because you've got to wind the handle on to then put the quadrant on. But then if you need to adjust anything, you've got to take it all apart again. It's really finicky, and if this ever needs reworking in the future, it definitely needs looking at, because you're driving everything off threaded areas. So you've got a threaded shaft with 2 nuts locking the threaded handle in place, which I don't like it. It should ideally be driving a square cut regulator drive rod, but each to their own. Now it comes time for sealing these up. Now the fittings that go into the top of the valve chest and the exhaust port, they weren't sealed previously, so using some Held-Ite and getting them good and tight, it's just stopping any chances of steam leaks. The exhaust pipe here, which is now going on, that was also loose on every joint, so that's all been tightened up, and everything's getting a good seal up with some high temperature silicone all the way around the bottom of the smoke box before that goes back on, and get this bolted in. Now these are a pain. You've got to go in behind the valve chest covers to get the bolts in. Sorry, not valve chest covers, the cylinder covers here. And they're a bloody nuisance. You can't get the cylinder covers off without taking the running boards off, and then the angle that the running board sits on is actually welded on, which makes it even harder to get at the bolts for the cylinder covers. So yeah, trying to get your fingers in behind here, get cut to ribbons, and really not a lot of space for turning the nuts, but I manage. Excuse me. Then I've got half a dozen Allen bolts to get in from the base to get the smoke box base bolted into the bottom of the smoke box. A little bit fiddly, but with the boiler off, this isn't too bad. And then I am putting back together the lubricator drive. The bit I actually fixed earlier in the video, I ended up taking off again. But yeah, just making sure everything's all good and tight, and all the drive works as it should do. Getting everything at the correct angle, so when it does come to get this engine moving again, it should all be good. Then I forgot to turn my camera on for the boiler remating to the smoke box. Yeah, unfortunately just missed that, but it's not a big job. And then it's a case of reassembling the bodywork. Sides of the cab go back on. A little bit awkward dealing with the regulator rod when doing that, but it's not too bad. And then plumbing goes back on for the injectors. Forgot to do that before I put the side on. It would have been a lot easier, but I managed all the same. Then it's back on with the saddle tank. A little bit weird, this one. This saddle tank has never actually been plumbed for water. It is actually half full of sand at the moment, so I imagine it has been used as adding extra ballast to the locomotive. Yeah, really weird that it's never been plumbed for water, but I do understand that saddle tanks are quite difficult to get watertight, and in this scenario it's never been plumbed in. Maybe the owner in the future may well commission that and actually get it working, but for now we are just leaving it as is. It is a tender fed water supply on the both injectors. Ashpan back on, running boards all back in place, lubricators back on. The final job I carry out today is I fasten the steam pipes. Now these were finger tight previously, and I can totally see why they were only finger tight previously, because they're an absolute pain in the arse to get tight. You've got to get them in at the top, in at the bottom, and then tighten them up, and you can turn the spanner about a 1/12 of a turn, so it's a lot of flipping of spanners to get these on. And the right hand side was particularly difficult to get back on, because as everything's been tightened, everything's a little bit harder to get at. But yeah, there was probably quite a lot of steam lost for insecure fittings, and also the fact that the valve chest wasn't correctly bolted to the frame, which I sorted out on the first day, which unfortunately didn't get videoed. But yeah, it's all going back together nicely. Couple of jobs left to do on Monday really. I kind of ran out of time in my day's work here. But yeah, come Monday, couple of jobs to finish buttoning up, another hydraulic test, and then give it a good steam test and make sure everything's working properly. But yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I should hopefully catch you in a couple of days. Yeah, once I've got this steam test done, hopefully get another little video out midweek. We have got the customer coming in on Tuesday to test drive this locomotive up and down the yard, which should be hopefully fun, weather permitting. It'll be a good one. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.